Good evening, friends and distinguished guests. Welcome to Soka University America. Tonight, we come together to honor the legacies of two extraordinary peace builders, Daisaku Ikeda and David Krieger, whose commitment to nuclear disarmament and global peace continue to inspire hope. My name is Miho Takada from class of 2027, and I am honored to be your host for tonight's program. Thank you. To begin, please join me in welcoming the President of Soka University of America, Dr. Edo Fizel, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Miho. Good evening. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to our co-sponsored event with the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation to honor the legacies of our university founder, Daisaku Ikeda, and David Krieger, a founder of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, two champions of the nuclear disarmament movement. Today we reflect on their dialogue, Choose Hope. We are honored to have with us today Dr. Ivana Hughes, President of the NAPF since August 2022, and a senior lecturer in chemistry at Columbia University. Dr. Hughes has been a faculty member at Columbia since 2008, and she was awarded the Landfest Distinguished Columbia Faculty Award in 2020. Her work on ascertaining the radiological conditions in the Marshall Islands brought her to the field of nuclear disarmament and eventually to the NAPF. She currently serves as a member of the Scientific Advisory Group to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Hughes back to SUA. Actually, Dr. Hughes has become a really good friend of the university, and we look forward to our continued collaboration with the NAPF. She'll be sharing some reflections shortly. We're also grateful to have Christian Chobanu, Policy and Advocacy Director at the NAPF, who will participate in our panel discussion today. Please welcome Mr. Chobanu to SUA. So I recently checked out the book, Choose Hope, from the Ikeda Library to prepare for today's event. I loved reading the dialogue between Mr. Ikeda and Dr. Krieger. I'll return the book tomorrow, so students, you can check it out after that. The dialogue covered all aspects of working against violence, promoting nuclear abolition, and the important role youth and education play in these efforts. I recall being at a meeting with Mr. Ikeda in the late 1990s when he mentioned to a group of us that he was going to have a dialogue with Dr. Krieger. At that point, he turned to me and asked if I was familiar with Dr. Krieger. I answered truthfully that I was not. Mr. Ikeda gave me a really hard time for not knowing about him. He only relented a bit when I shared that because of my area of specialty, economics, I could not know about all specific scholars and efforts in the area of nuclear abolition. But thanks to this dialogue, I and millions of others were introduced to the important work of Dr. Krieger. Given this background, I found it surprising that in the first section of the dialogue, Mr. Ikeda shared with Dr. Krieger about the Victory Over Violence campaign the SGI USA Youth had launched in the late 1990s. I happened to be the SGI USA National Youth Leader at that time. In response, Dr. Krieger shared, quote, "It is especially significant because the young people initiated on their own accord in their desire to change our times. When young people take action, they are bound to learn from their experience. It takes courage to speak out and act for nonviolence when surrounded by violence. But it is the only way to transform a culture of violence to a culture of peace," unquote. These are important words for all youth to consider. At one point in the dialogue, Dr. Krieger and Mr. Ikeda turned to discussing the hibakusha, who both were very familiar with and had high hopes in terms of promoting nuclear abolition and the establishment of peace. As you know, the hibakusha were awarded this year's Nobel Peace Prize. In the dialogue, Dr. Krieger shared a poem he wrote about the hibakusha that I'd like to share. The Deep Bow of a Hibakusha for Miyoko Matsubara. She bowed deeply. She bowed deeper than the oceans. She bowed from the top of Mount Fuji to the bottom of the ocean. She bowed so deeply and so often that the winds blew hard. The winds blew her whispered apologies and prayers across all the continents. But the winds whistled too loudly and made it impossible to hear her apologies and prayers. The winds made the oceans crazy. The water in the oceans rose up in a wild molecular dance. The oceans threw themselves against the continents. The people were frightened. They ran screaming from the shores. They feared the white water and the whistling wind. They huddled together in dark places. They strained to hear the words in the wind. In some places, there were some people who thought they heard an apology. In other places, there were people who thought they heard a prayer. She bowed deeply. She bowed more deeply than anyone should bow. I was so moved by the poem I wanted to share it. And I didn't know that Dr. Krieger was an amazing poet. Both Krieger and Ikeda shared the importance of apology, and Dr. Krieger shared how the Hibakusha begin with forgiveness before apology, and hence the beautiful poem he wrote. I know they would be so happy about the Hibakusha receiving the Nobel Peace Prize this year. Both Mr. Ikeda and Dr. Krieger also shared their great hopes for education to turn the tide in society. Ikeda states, quote, "If wisdom is like water, education is like the pump. In the years to come, the role of education in developing and nurturing wisdom will become increasingly vital." Dr. Krieger concurred and shared, quote, "We need an education different from what is current. Until now, education has concentrated on the practical tasks like reading, writing, and arithmetic. But this kind of schooling is insufficient to eliminate the severe threats our species faces. We now require education in compassion and altruism, education that places a supreme priority for life. This kind of education can become the basis for an inner revolution," unquote. I think both Mr. Ikeda and Dr. Krieger will be pleased and proud of the progress SUA is making in promoting the type of education they speak of and envision. Let us learn today from the wisdom and lives of Daisaku Ikeda and David Krieger. Thank you all for taking the time to come today, and please enjoy the event.
Thank you, President Fiesel, for your inspiring words. Next, we are honored to welcome Dr. Ivana Nikolic-Hughes, President of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, to share her words on David Krieger's lifelong commitment to nuclear disarmament and enduring relevance of his dialogue with Mr. Ikeda to today's world.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you, President Fiesel, for your inspiring remarks. Thank you to the university, to Soka Institute for Global Solutions, to Professor Tetsushi Ogata, Professor Alexander Harang, and everyone else involved for putting this wonderful event together to jointly honor two great men, David Krieger and Daisaku Ikeda, who have inspired countless people around the planet in their relentless pursuit of goodness, peace, and nuclear disarmament. It is wonderful to be back on this beautiful campus and to continue to learn more about Mr. Ikeda and his legacy, including the history of this inspiring and tremendous university. The contributions of David Krieger and Daisaku Ikeda to a better world were many. And because Daisaku Ikeda is so well known to this community, I just want to tell you a little bit about David so that you can have some context for the relationship between these two extraordinary men, which I will also discuss. David Krieger was born in 1942 in Los Angeles. He attended Occidental College, where he received a bachelor's degree in psychology. He attended University of Hawaii, where he received a PhD in political science, as well as Santa Barbara College of Law, where he received his law degree. It was in Hawaii that David met his beloved wife of 57 years, Carolee Krieger. It was also during his studies in Hawaii that he first traveled to Japan. David was so moved by his experience visiting Hiroshima and Nagasaki that he dedicated his life to the pursuit of peace in a world free of nuclear weapons. David and Carol Lee moved to Santa Barbara in the early 1970s, raising their 3 children in the beautiful town nestled between the mountains in the north and the Pacific Ocean in the south. But more than just a charming place to live, Santa Barbara is a civically minded community that inspired David to action. It was there that David discovered the vision to found the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, or NAPF. Santa Barbara also provided like-minded visionaries with whom he could partner on this quest. This all took place in 1982, at a moment when the nuclear arms race was nearing its height, and there were about 60,000 nuclear warheads in the world. That same year, 1 million people marched in Central Park in New York City, where I live, against nuclear weapons, united across ages, races, nationalities, professions, religions, and more. And the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation was to become a prominent organization educating and advocating for a just and peaceful world, one that is free of nuclear weapons. During his time as founder and president of NAPF, the organization engaged in a number of initiatives, playing a key role in Abolition 2000, in the Middle States Initiative, in Nuclear Zero lawsuits, and many more. Just to give one example, it was with the help of President Ikeda and Soka Gakkai International that Abolition 2000 garnered 13 million signatures in Japan in favor of nuclear abolition. I came to the helm of the organization almost exactly 40 years after NAPF was founded to continue David's legacy. By the time I got to know David better through in-person and virtual meetings at NAPF, his health was already declining. I've previously described what it was like to be in meetings with David at this point in his life, and I'm quoting myself now. In quote, "He would quietly sit through meetings, and then after hearing a lively and sometimes heated discussion about one topic or another, David would make a statement so deep and thoughtful that we would all, at least for a moment, be speechless. He had a brilliant mind, an enormous heart, and a moral compass, second to none." End of quote. When Mr. Ikeda passed away on November 15th, 2023, David wrote the following to me in an email. Quote, "Daisaku Ikeda was a force of nature and a fount of creativity. He built educational institutions, including 2 universities. He was also a poet, a philosopher, and a photographer, a true Renaissance man. Our dialogue, which was published as a book, Choose Hope, was a highlight of my work on abolishing nuclear weapons." End of quote. David then passed away less than 1 month later on December 7th, 2023. I would now like to spend a little bit of time highlighting 3 things about the relationship between David Krieger and Daisaku Ikeda. The first is that they had faith in the possibility of a better world. The second is that they both strongly believed in the importance of youth and education. And the third is that they both loved and wrote poetry. I will now speak about each of these in turn. The possibility of a better world is precisely why they wrote a book whose title they immediately decided was to be Choose Hope. Their dialogue is an inspiration to all who dare question the status quo and imagine a better future. As Mairead Maguire, who won the 1976 Nobel Peace Prize for her contributions to ending the violent conflict in Northern Ireland, wrote for the book's cover, this is in quote, "This book gives us all hope because it reminds us that in addition to the gift of life, we're each also given the gift of choice." End of quote. I think Ms. McGuire's remark captures beautifully the fact that the title of the book is not just about having hope or being hopeful, but about choosing hope, something we all can do, something we all must do. I was deeply moved while reading the book by the breadth and depth of President Krieger and President Ikeda's discussion, and by the amalgamation of their contributions. In the book, they dig deeply into both practical and visionary elements of peace and disarmament, and yet they touch upon philosophy, other societal ills, literature, the future of the United Nations, just to name a few of the themes. Moreover, the book is quite literally a dialogue in which they switch off writing, and their paragraphs, marked as either Ikeda or Krieger, blend into one another in a seamless and wide-ranging conversation. But it's more than that. It is also the case that despite labels, I felt frequently impelled to check who had written a particular sentence, only to come to the realization that the way in which they thought about the world and expressed themselves went beyond friendship and mutual understanding, but rather suggested a deep and sacred connection between them. I would now like to share a bit about the importance of youth and education to both Daisaku Ikeda and David Krieger. After all, we're here at Soka University of America, a university founded by Daisaku Ikeda. In Choose Hope, Mr. Ikeda states, quote, "The hallmark of youth is optimism and high idealism. The young are constantly challenged to open the door to new eras. Hope is another name for youth." End of quote. David Krieger adds, quote, "I would like young people to realize the insanity of living with nuclear weapons, of destroying the environment, of hoarding money while others starve, of settling our differences by killing each other, of dividing ourselves by artificial borders around parcels of earth we call nations. I would like young people to join hands across borders and insist that their elders do so too, in order to end our present insanity. In short, I would like young people to choose hope." End of quote. Mr. Ikeda also states, quote, "Josei Toda insisted that the passion and power of youth will build a new world. Always with the bold statement in mind, I have exerted my utmost to make the 21st century a century of peace, and I strive to be in frequent contact with young people, to observe their growth, and to express my expectations regarding their responsibilities to future generations." End of quote. It was not just in words that our leaders valued youth and education, but in action and the care that they devoted to both setting up the structures that would enhance the engagement of youth in critical issues of our time, but also in the way that they interacted with and inspired young people. And they continue to do so. This event is evidence of this impact. Finally, the last but not least aspect of President Krieger and President Ikeda's relationship that I would like to discuss is that they both loved and wrote poetry. And so today, I want to share with you 3 poems, one written by Mr. Ikeda and 2 written by David, one of which is dedicated to Mr. Ikeda. Mr. Ikeda's poem is entitled "Springing from the Earth." Springing from the earth. Traveler, from whence do you come? And where do you go? The moon has set, but the sun has not yet risen. In the chaos of darkness before the dawn, seeking the light, I advance to dispel the dark clouds from my mind, to find a great tree unbowed by the tempest. I emerge from the earth. The next poem that I will read to you is entitled Voice of a Bell, and it was written by David Krieger for Daisaku Ikeda. This poem is included in the preface to Choose Hope, written on August 6th, 2001. Voice of a Bell. As we travel on this journey, I hear your voice clearly, like the voice of a bell ringing for peace. Your vision is reflected in bright eyes and smiling faces. I hear your voice clearly in the voice of the people. The earnest, the seeker, the questioner, the worker, the pilgrim, the sage. I hear your voice clearly. Like the sharp, solid voice, the pure, open voice of a bell ringing out again and again for peace. Both poems, springing from the earth and the voice of a bell, invoke the word travel, signifying the way in which both poets viewed their time on earth. Moreover, in the voice of a bell, it is Daisaku Ikeda that is not just a traveler, but a bell ringing out again and again for peace. Another one of David's poems invokes the bell. It is entitled The Bells of Nagasaki. And I cannot help but think that David thought of the two poems as connected. Here's The Bells of Nagasaki. The bells of Nagasaki. The bells of Nagasaki ring for those who suffered and those who suffer still. They draw old women to them and young couples with love-glazed eyes. They draw in small children walking awkwardly toward the epicenter. The bells of Nagasaki, elusive as a flowing stream, ring for each of us, ring like falling leaves. When I was in Nagasaki in July of this year, which was my first trip to Japan, I had the most moving visit, where I got to spend time with two hibakusha, Mr. Tanaka and Ms. Mitamura, both of Nihon Hidankyo, the winner of this year's Nobel Peace Prize. I got to speak at the Atomic Bomb Museum at the 30th International Symposium for Peace, to lay a wreath at the Nagasaki epicenter, and spend time with some of the most wonderful people I've ever met, including Japanese activists, academics, journalists, diplomats, students, and more. On my first morning in Nagasaki, I actually had a little bit of time before my first engagement, and so I headed to the Nagasaki Hills all on my own. It was an enchanting visit, during which I thought about David and Mr. Ikeda and everyone who had devoted their lives to amplifying the message that Nagasaki and Hiroshima have for us all about peace and about nuclear weapons. When I returned to my hotel room before lunch, I wrote a poem that I titled The Hills of Nagasaki. Only later did I realize that the title was in harmony with the title of David's poem, The Bells of Nagasaki. I would now like to share with you The Hills of Nagasaki, and this is the first time I'm sharing this poem publicly, and I'm just warning you, I hope I can do it without tearing up, but it's possible I won't, so if that happens, please forgive me. The Hills of Nagasaki. The hills call me to witness not just their beauty, but also their pain. We tried, we really did, they seem to say. We stopped the blast from getting farther. We held the radiation close. We offered shelter to the thirsty bodies, and we brought back the first rose. Now there's life bustling everywhere, but we know what it was like when all there was agony and fear, when so many lost all that was dear. Thank you for your visit, and please do pass on the message of never again, not just here, but anywhere. So let me close by saying that both President Krieger and President Ikeda, just like the bells and the hills of Nagasaki, would have wanted us all to pass on the message of never again. This is why the subtitle of their book, Choose Hope, is your role in the nuclear age. And our role, quite simply, has to be to say never again, over and over and over again, until our cries for sanity, our cries for nuclear abolition, and our cries for humanity are heard by people everywhere and acted upon by those who have the power to make the world whole again. It pains me to think what President Ikeda and President Krieger would have thought about the current moment in our world. Although the Ukraine war and the war in Gaza had both started before they passed away, the subsequent escalations, the expansion of the Middle East conflict beyond Gaza, and for well over a year now, would have devastated both of them. When it comes to Ukraine, it's as if we're back in the Cuban Missile Crisis, with threats to use nuclear weapons, cross red lines, and call bluffs coming at us at an hourly rate. In his famous and beautiful commencement address at American University in 1963, which he delivered just months after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and also just months before he was brutally assassinated, President John F. Kennedy stated, in quote, "Above all, while defending our own vital interests, nuclear powers must avert those confrontations which bring an adversary to a choice of either a humiliating retreat or a nuclear war. To adopt that kind of course in the nuclear age would be evidence only of the bankruptcy of our policy or of a collective death wish for the world." End of quote. We pulled back from the brink in the early 1960s, then again in the 1980s, and we must do it again now. We must choose hope and keep repeating never again. This is precisely what David Krieger and Daisaku Ikeda would have wanted us to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes, for your moving tribute. We will now hear from Mr. Alexander Haron, Distinguished Adjunct Professor at Soka University of America. Mr. Haron will share his reflections on Daisaku Ikeda's steadfast commitment to nuclear disarmament and Mr. Ikeda's belief in the transformative power of dialogue.
Thank you so much, Mio. And it's such an honor to stand here with our brilliant friends from NAPF and also from Santa Barbara. Fantastic. It is such an honor. And just like Ed made note of, this relationship between our founders, Krieger and Ikeda, and this fantastic book. There's so much to say about it, but I'm not going to give you a summary. I'm just going to share some simple reflections. But it's such a valuable book. And now that Ed is delivering his book back to the library, it's available for you students. And if it's taken, then you can come to my office, because I brought my own copy all the way from Norway when I moved here a year ago. And that is because this is actually a very important book, also for me personally. But before I delve into the specific dialogue we have at hand, I would like to say a few words about this genre. Let's call it the Ikeda-style dialogue, if you like, in a published book format. Because as you may be aware, Ikeda was a prolific writer, and Krieger too, of course. Krieger wrote at least 20 books and hundreds of articles, and Ikeda, well, he got to be 14 years older, but still he had 3,000 publications, spanning over 150,000 pages. And if you are like me, reading maybe 10,000 pages a year, well, that takes you about 15 years just to cover that. And that's my philo study here at SUA. The authorship of Daisaku Ikeda, his peace philosophy, and also the field of nuclear disarmament. But when you look at the dialogues and the dialogue's place in this authorship, as you mentioned, Ikeda wrote poetry, but he also he has written very many monographs and essay collections on peace politics, on Buddhism, on different educational aspects. But there's so many different formats that he operates in. By the way, since this is registration week, that's when you sign up and enroll in courses. And I'm offering a course next semester on the peace proposals. That's 40 peace proposals that Ikeda submitted to the UN. So if any of you are interested in delving deep into the peace philosophy this university is founded upon, then you can enroll in my course tonight. That's possible. But anyhow, that was beside the point. But still, Ikeda's extensive authorships consist of 76 dialogues published in book format. 39 of them are available to all of you in English. And if you think about it, Ikeda, throughout his life, he conducted about 1,500 dialogues. So those 39 books available to you, that's just the best of the best. And in these dialogues, Ikeda is dialoguing with world leaders in politics, with we would say esteemed people from, or representatives of religions, cultural icons. And you can see many of the names here around you. And of course, leaders, or not only leaders, but the leading peace thinkers of its time. And of course, David Krieger is one of them. So, the Choose Hope that we have in front of us that we're going to dig into today, I would say that's among the most important of these dialogues with the leading peace activists and peace thinkers of his time. And there are so many reasons why you should read this book. One is that a dialogue like this introduces you to dialogue partners' lives and their legacies, which an ordinary monograph just doesn't. And through reading this book, you will gain insight into how these extraordinary persons approach peace and disarmament from different angles, with different approaches, but with the exact same goal. So this dialogue is not a debate on who has the best answers to these immense challenges. It is much more like a joint effort to identify the most effective pathway to sustainable peace in a world without nuclear weapons. And on a personal level, I've spent most of my life in the peace movement. Ever since age 14, I've been representing the anti-nuclear movement in Norway, both on national and international levels. And if you've been in this game for quite some time like I have, then you come across both Krieger and Ikeda. And you can't really come across those kind of peace champions without them making an impression on you. Everything from the World Court Project back in the 1990s, which was very dear to Krieger's heart, and you can read about it in the book, of course, all the way up to 22, 23, and the no first use proposals of IKEA. So this has been a great source, this book also, and of course Krieger's life has been a great source of inspiration personally for my own peace activism, as for countless other peace activists around the entire world. So if you read Choose Hope, I therefore expect that you also will be empowered in your own peace activism. Peace was the only possible pathway for Krieger and Ikeda. Every single page in this book bears witness to that. The truly courageous persons rejects violence and stand up to the advantage of all humanity. Armed might symbolizes human cowardice and spiritual defeat, says Ikeda on page 72. Like Ivana, I also find the subtitle of this book very important. And it reads, Your Role in Waging Peace in the Nuclear Age. So it starts with you. This is essential. Every societal change ever made have always started with an individual. And that individual is you, of course. Krieger and Ikeda shared this fundamental point of departure, that world peace starts with the individual decision to envision peace, to be able to think peace, see peace, and to dedicate oneself to this great cause, and to make the individual choice, just like Ivana stated, to hope. It's a choice to hope for a better world to materialize through such efforts. It takes the initiative of ordinary individuals to eliminate nuclear weapons and create a peaceful world, says Ikeda on page 44. For us to choose hope in this manner, it may be useful to have someone to look up to, just like Ikeda and Krieger. They are true peace heroes. They are heroes of peace. And we all need heroes sometimes. And this is actually a topic that I think is dealt with quite elegantly in that book. Because throughout this book, you find references to the heroes, the peace heroes of disarmament and peace, for both Krieger and Ikeda. And they make note of so many things they've done that they share, and simply put, they had the same heroes, mostly. So I was thinking about giving you a few examples, but then I have to figure out where my manuscript is, because it's a bit messy today, not usually. I was thinking about here. Now, first of all, if you look at the first three chapters of this book, Ikeda and Krieger praises heroes of their past, such as Mahatma Gandhi, José Toda, and Albert Einstein. But they also jointly praise their contemporary heroes, such as Nelson Mandela. We have many of them here. Such as Nelson Mandela, Linus Pauling, and Joseph Rufflard. See page 43, 66 to 68, and 72 for many more examples. Several of these names are familiar to you who are here on campus, as central buildings at our university are named after these great champions of peace. And I find these buildings to be a pleasant reminder of the peace philosophy our university is founded upon, and I hope you do too. The last two heroes mentioned, Linus Pauling and Joseph Ruppert, were also great champions of nuclear disarmament, just like Krieger and Ikeda. If you would like to learn more about their thinking on how to achieve a world without nuclear weapons, I suggest you also read Ikeda's dialogues with them. These dialogues are complementary to Choose Hope, as they introduce even more approaches to the same issues Ikeda and Krieger addresses in their dialogue. And lastly, just like Ivana reflected upon, since we are at this university founded by Ikeda, I would like to share some reflections on how this book addresses the role of education in waging peace. The last chapter is dedicated to this topic alone, but educating for peace also runs through the entire dialogue as a red thread. So, here's a quote for you. If enough youth were educated to think for themselves about participating in wars, older people would be forced to find more creative ways of resolving their disputes, says Krieger. If enough young people were educated to think for themselves about fighting, killing, and the value of life, we would be well on our way towards a peaceful world, says Krieger. And Ikeda replies on page 58, I have long advocated that education be free from all interference, separated from politics. Education is not for the nation state, but for all humanity. Here, it may be helpful to note that peace education is always normative, as it is education for a specific purpose, which is peace, of course. At the same time, peace education should not be about preaching one's politics. An example, in peace studies, we study wars with the purpose of ending them. In this endeavor, we seek to understand the warring party's behavior without in any way advocating for one to win militarily over the other. On the contrary, we study violent conflict to contribute to non-violent conflict resolution. And Krieger and Ikeda jointly argue for more peace education like this throughout this book. Now, Krieger was also a professor, and neither him nor Ikeda argues that education should be used to indoctrinate students to become their obedient followers. To them, education is about how to think and not what to think. And both Krieger and Ikeda therefore argue that education should be a vehicle for peace through the development of students' critical and independent thinking, and through exposing students to open-minded exchange of ideas. From this perspective, peace education isn't less objective or more subjective than, say, international relations. The same intellectual ideals of independent thinking and rigorous research applies for peace studies as for political science, or war studies for that matter. Ultimately, people need the capacity to think for themselves and to exercise that capacity to reach intelligent conclusions. Peace education is a source of hope and inspiration, says Krieger, on page 175. And Ikeda ends this dialogue with the following sentences on just that topic. Rather than giving in to faith or circumstances, let us prove our humanity and show its true power as we write a new history of peace. Resolutely and courageously striving to that end indicates we have chosen hope. And that's a good idea. So choose hope. So to be sure, choose hope, everybody. And with that, I thank you for your attention. I look forward to more conversation on nuclear disarmament and whatever may come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haran, for your powerful insights. We now transition to our panelist discussion on the Ikeda-Krieger dialogue, Choose Hope. This session features diverse perspectives on how the dialogue has inspired action toward global peace and nuclear disarmament. Our first panelist is Christian Chovannu, Policy and Advocacy Director at the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. Joining him are two of our fellow SUA students, Marina Inoue from class of 2025 and Daiki Katsukawa from class of 2026. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the stage.
I'll be speaking here at the table. Is this on? Thank you so much. Thank you, and I also prepared a PowerPoint presentation as well regarding Choose Hope. So this book has really inspired my life in the nuclear abolition movement. I've been involved, affiliated with the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation since 2010, for a long time now. Next slide. So I was looking through the book and trying to really find like an inspirational quote that really summarized like the movement and what we've been doing. And that's from one of these really inspirational quotes is from Dr. David Krieger, who mentioned in the preface of the book, quote, "We have reached a point in human history that demands more from each of us. It is not just leaders who make history, it is all of us." So looking at this and thinking about what my other panelists have mentioned, including Dr. Hughes, regarding the role of young people, I wanted to talk about the emergence of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and the humanitarian approach. So next slide, please. So in 2010, at the NPT Review Conference, the state parties who were there, 189 states, collectively agreed and expressed their deep concern at the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of any use of nuclear weapons, and reaffirmed the need for all states at all times to comply with international humanitarian law. This was the first time that young people, Hibakusha, the survivors of the atomic bombings, as well as smaller states, many of them are usually ignored and discriminated against, really took the stage and said, we have to talk about nuclear weapons through a humanitarian lens. And that led to the humanitarian initiative, which began to demystify the conversation about nuclear weapons, focusing on the role of young people and the human element of these weapons. There were 3 humanitarian conferences that were held that led to the TPNW, which focused on the harm caused by the past use and testing of nuclear weapons. And finally, yes, it's okay. So they were in Oslo, Mexico, and Vienna, in Austria. And this photo here is a public stunt that a group of young people and myself did on the beach in Nayarit, right next to the venue of the conference in Mexico. And all of these, the Youth for Energy really inspired the state to take action. And in 2016, at a special forum, they developed recommendations to convene a conference on establishing a treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons. So this led to the 2017, next slide please, to the 2017 conference on the TPNW. So there in the front of the room is Ambassador Elaine White, who we recently honored at Women Waging Peace event in Santa Barbara, California, for her role as president of this historic conference. The TPNW prohibits developing, testing, producing, manufacturing, transferring, possessing, stockpile, using or threatening to use nuclear weapons, and so forth. But it also contains a series of positive obligations. Next slide, please. Article 6 requires state parties to provide victim assistance and environmental remediation to individuals in areas under their jurisdiction or control affected by the use or testing of nuclear weapons. So really for the affected states to help those who've been harmed by these weapons. And Article 7 requires all state parties who are in a position to do so to provide assistance to these affected states and to these communities. And the picture that you see here, it's Dr. Hughes, myself, ICRC, as well as representatives of Kiribati and Kazakhstan. And both Kiribati and Kazakhstan are smaller states which have often been ignored in the International Disarmament Forum. Their views are usually pushed aside, brushed aside. Everyone's usually obsessed with what the nuclear weapon states have to say and not what these smaller states are pushing for in terms of nuclear justice. So if we go to the next slide, you can see an image of Kiribati. It's in the, if you look at the international date line, it's the indentation on the international date line, and that's where Kiribati is located. And it's an island country in the Central Pacific Ocean. And it's home to the South Pacific's largest marine reserve. Unfortunately, it has a very dark history. Next slide. Which deals with the legacy of nuclear testing, both by the United Kingdom and the US. On April 28, 1958, the UK detonated its largest thermonuclear test under Operation Grapple in Kiribati. It was 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima, the atomic bomb that was unleashed in Hiroshima. At the time, a reporter from the Daily Mirror wrote, "It was a dress rehearsal for the death of the world. Through closed eyes, through dark glasses, and with my hands covering my face, I saw the flash, brighter than the sun, hotter than the sun, and ripped out of the secrets of the heart of the universe." So that was how powerful that thermonuclear test was. The 500 citizens living in Kiribati, on a small island called Christmas Island at the time of the test, received little protection and inadequate warning. Not being aware of the dangers of such tests, most of them lifted the covering provided for them to catch a glimpse of the intensely hot cloud of fire above them. Many of them developed cancers and severe post-traumatic stress disorders. In Kazakhstan, next slide, between 1949 and 1989, an area called the Semiplenetsk test site was one of the primary locations for Soviet above and below ground nuclear testing. In total, 456 nuclear tests occurred there, including 340 underground and 116 atmospheric tests were conducted in the region. Next slide. So there's hope. So after the TPNW came into force, there was this gathering of Pacific states that came together to talk about how they can help provide assistance to the victims of nuclear tests. They also recognize that the TPNW is consistent with the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime. They also recognize that even though they are small states, they have a big impact in the world. And there you can see a picture of the then Prime Minister of New Zealand addressing the participants, and then also a picture of a group of young people that we brought to New Zealand, where we hosted a youth forum on the TPNW with Beatrice Finn, the former executive director of ICANN. Next slide, please. So the first meeting of state parties to the TPNW took place in Vienna, Austria, and it established an informal working group on victim assistance, environmental remediation, international cooperation assistance. It includes, the state parties adopted a Vienna action plan, which looks at the feasibility of and proposed guidelines for an international trust fund for affected states. So this is the beginning stage of providing assistance to the victims. At the second meeting of state parties to the TPNW, next slide please, they agreed to have focused discussions under the informal working group on victim assistance, environmental remediation, international cooperation and assistance, this time looking at the establishment of an international trust fund. And then a report will be submitted to the third meeting of state parties, which will happen in March of next year, regarding the establishment of such a fund. In addition, next slide please, Kiribati and Kazakhstan have been taking the fight on nuclear justice all the way through the UN General Assembly. So recently, last year, there was a key resolution on nuclear justice, which passed. 37 states supported it, 37 states co-sponsored it, 171 states voted for it. And it was to recognize the importance of providing justice to the victims of both the use and testing of nuclear weapons. It was tabled again this year, and in the new version of the resolution, the updated version, called for an international meeting on victim assistance and environmental remediation to be held in 2026. So this will be and to be convened by the UN Secretary General. So this will be the first time that the UN will have a focused discussion on nuclear justice. Something that some of the nuclear weapon states, including the United Kingdom and France, are very afraid of, because they do not want discussions on this subject matter. They want these states to be ignored, they want to brush away the past, and they don't want to deal with what they have done in both South Pacific as well in Kazakhstan. So this is quite historic for these states to be standing up and to really taking a role in nuclear justice, and really embodying the spirit and message of Dr. David Krieger. The Nuclear Age Peace Foundation has been heavily involved in supporting both states in their work, engagement at the UN. In addition to our collaboration with these states, we're really highlighting the work with young people. So next slide. So this is us at a special event in Paris, learning about the TPNW and how to take action, and how young people, such as those in this room, can really take action and mobilize and engage with their friends. We do quite a lot of work with universities, next slide, in the New York City area, on looking at how nuclear weapons relate to climate change, and the two issues, how they intersect. In addition, we've also organized many events at state parties meetings. So next slide. So we had an international youth orientation in Vienna, Austria, which was hosted at the Embassy of Ireland, looking at key aspects of the TPNW, as well as how young people can take action. And it was an intergenerational dialogue. So we included experts, as well as representatives from the International Red Cross, as well as Hibakusha and peace messengers from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At the second meeting of state parties, next slide, we organized again a youth orientation, this time at the Mission of Ireland in New York. And we collaborated with Ireland because Ireland has been a very progressive state in terms of both disarmament education as well as the humanitarian disarmament movement. We also organized an art exhibit and a discussion on Articles 6 and 7 with the prefecture of Hiroshima. So there in the group photo, you can see the governor of Hiroshima. Yeah. Recently, focusing on the intergenerational impact of nuclear weapons, as well as the need to have dialogue with survivors, we went to Kazakhstan. Next slide. And we organized a youth forum in Kazakhstan, where young people expressed themselves on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons. These youth included individuals from Japan, from Kiribati, Kazakhstan, as well as Hibakusha, both from Japan and Korean Hibakusha as well. And it was very important to have that intergenerational dialogue with them to learn about the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons, and then how we can all take action together. And why Kazakhstan? Because Kazakhstan at that time, in August of this year, hosted both a special conference on nuclear weapon-free zones, as well as the coordination committee of the TPNW, where a group of states came together to talk about the plans for the third meeting of state parties, including the establishment of the International Trust Fund. So through these workshops and dialogues, we're really able to think about how everyone has a role in creating a world free of nuclear weapons. And as David mentioned in the preface, we really have reached a point in human history that demands more from each of us. It's not just the leaders, the diplomats in the room who make the history, it's all of us, everyone in this room, and young people in general, as well as older generations, having discussions of how we can mobilize and achieve a world free of nuclear weapons. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ivan, Alexander, and Christian for sharing such amazing words. My name is Marina. I am a fourth-year student here at SOCA. I'm really grateful to be here and have a beautiful conversation with all of you. I will just briefly share about some of the points that I found interesting from the book Choose Hope that we are discussing today. And before that, I want to share a little bit more about myself. My name is Marina Inoue. I am a fourth-year student here at SOCA, and I'm concentrating in social behavioral sciences and humanities. I'm from Russia. I was born and raised there, and I'm also half Japanese. My dad and his side of the family are from Japan. I'm also a student assistant for the SOCA Institute for Global Solutions, and this is partially why I'm here right now talking to you. And to be very honest with you, up until starting working with SOCA Institute for Global Solutions, I was never really concerned about the issue of nuclear weapons. Although coming from a state that has nuclear weapons and is so actively involved in this issue, I was never really concerned and never really informed about this issue. The reason why I'm sharing all of these things about myself is because one of the points in the book talks about how important it is for each individual to be involved in this process, no matter how you identify, no matter where you come from, no matter what your interests are. And I'm here sitting talking to you, having almost no background in this issue. However, I really want to encourage all of us here bringing further this conversation with our friends, families, because as Daisaku Ikeda and David Krieger discuss in this book, it is very important for all of us, no matter what our backgrounds is, to talk about this issue, first of all, because it's an issue about all of us. And further, moving to the second point, as I mentioned, because it's a global issue, one of the points that I highlighted for myself is that while there's so many problems, and nuclear weapons is one of the issues, there's so many problems, global problems right now, which are borderless and affect the whole humanity. We still continue thinking our awareness is still limited to the borders and interests of our own states. And I feel like nowadays we're divided so much more based on those interests of our states. However, it is very important to realize that the issues that we're facing are far beyond those limits. And we need to, first of all, be loyal to our humanity, to be loyal to the fact that we are all here together, living at the same time, in the same place, having similar concerns all together, despite what our national identity is. We are all here fighting for the same goal. And finally, the last point that I want to make is the importance of hope, which is obviously the name of our book. The hope and imagination. For all of that, for those of us who is already involved in the issue, fighting for abolishing nuclear weapons or any other global issues that we're fighting with, it's very easy to lose hope. However, I highlighted this part where Daisaku Ikeda and David Krieger is saying that justice is on our side, so we should continue fighting no matter what. Even if you think that your efforts are very limited and very small, this is not true. Please continue fighting and believing that justice is on your side. And with imagination, the authors of the book talk about how important it is to have imagination to imagine the problems that are all around the world. However, I want to point out we're here at SOCA right now, and we don't even need to use our imagination as much because there's so many representatives of different nationalities here. And we have a capacity to have dialogues with each other and learn more about the issues that we are fighting with individually, nationally, but also, again, reminding ourselves that we are all here together for the same goal of having world peace. So these were the points that I highlighted for myself. Thank you so much again for letting me.
Thank you so much, Ivana, Alexander, Christian, and Marina. Good evening, everyone. My name is Daiki Katsukawa, and I'm a student at Soka University here, and research assistant at Soka Global Institute for Global Solutions, and intern at the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. So it's a privilege to share my reflection on Choose Hope, the dialogue between founder Daisaku Ikeda and Dr. David Klieger, and how their insights guide me in my own journey towards peace. There was a time when I felt powerless in the face of nuclear issues. They seemed too vast, too complex, and I doubted whether my actions could ever make a difference. Choose Hope changed that for me. It taught me that peace doesn't start with dramatic actions. It begins with small, deliberate steps in our immediate surroundings. This lesson became clear to me in my daily life at SUA. Living in the dorms, I've learned that dialogue, empathy, and mutual respect are essential for building harmony in our diverse community. It's often the small, spontaneous moments, such as sharing meal or having late-night conversation, that create trust and deepen connections. These experiences taught me that peace begins with understanding the person in front of us and fostering care in our immediate surroundings. When I was 13, I visited Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum and saw the burned lunchbox of a 13-year-old boy. On August 6, 1945, the boy Shigeru died while holding his never-eaten lunchbox. That image shocked me deeply and resolved me to carry forward the Hibakusha's will, ensuring that such a tragedy would never be repeated. Founder Ikeda and Dr. Krieger both emphasizes that peace begins with recognizing our shared humanity. My experience here at Soka as a cross-country runner has taught me the joy of commonality, how shared goals transcend differences and bring people together. These moments reminded me that finding commonality can lead to create a unity. Dr. Krieger's reflection on imagining father inspired me. He encouraged us to envision creative solutions to nuclear abolition. This idea connects beautifully with what founder Ikeda describes as the imagination to care for others. It is through this imagination that we cultivate empathy, envision a world of mutual coexistence, and create a global society rooted in respect and understanding. Peace is not achieved by one person alone. It is the product of shared efforts and mutual care. During my time at SUA and my internship at the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, I've seen how collective actions, no matter how small, create an effect of positive change. Whether it's engaging in meaningful dialogue with peers or collaborating on projects that promote nuclear abolition, I've learned that peace grows when people work together within a shared vision and determination. As Dr. Klieger remarked, quote, "If delicate flowers can bud and blossom from the ruins of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we human beings too can rise from such destruction and tragedy," unquote. This is a powerful reminder that even in the face of immense challenges, hope and resilience can guide us forward. As I reflect on Choose Hope, I am reminded that choosing hope is a daily practice. It's found in the dialogue we engage in, the gestures of care we extend to others, and the creative solution we imagine for a better future. It is not about solving every issue at once, but about starting where we are and believing in the power of small actions. This is my role in Nuclear Age. Thank you for allowing me to share my journey. Let us all choose hope and continue striving for peace together. Thank you so much.
Thank you to our panelists for such an inspiring and thought-provoking discussion. We will now transition to the Q&A portion of this session. To ensure that everyone has an opportunity to ask questions, we kindly ask that you keep your questions concise and focused on the topics discussed. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and a member of our team will bring a microphone to you. Once the microphone reaches you, please introduce yourself briefly before asking your questions. Please feel free to direct your questions to any of our speakers today. Let's open the floor to questions.
Thank you so much. My name is Mikiko Fujino, and I'm a freshman year student at Soka University of America. And my question is the ability or capacity of discovering hope under any circumstance is really important. But my question is, Daisaku Ikeda proposed the key 3 elements of global citizen, and then it was wisdom, courage, and compassion. And here he didn't include the element of hope. But I feel like it's really important to have hope as a global citizen. So I just want to know that, what do you think? Why Ikeda, why our founder didn't include the element of hope as an element of global citizen?
Thank you so much for that question. We always refer to, well, not always, but very often we refer to the Columbia speech 96 when we talk about global citizenship education here at this university. And just like you say, the 3 elements that Ikeda puts forward is exactly those 3 formulations. But hope comes before there. A very fun thing is that just a few minutes before I came here, I was in class where we were actually discussing exactly this speech. Shota was there, he's my student. And didn't we talk about just this? Because if you look 2 paragraphs before these 3 values come up, you see a formulation that has to do, first of all, you find a quick definition of value creation. So that's the given. Before these values come, meaning wisdom, courage, compassion, you have value creation as a concept. First element of that concept is meaning. If you think a bit about what Ikeda reads into that, just a few sentences before he lists it up, hope is certainly part of it. It's the exact same process he is referring to. That when you, to make it very, very simple and sort of approachable, when you feel that you have no hope, you cannot experience any hope in yourself, you turn to focus inwards. Because that's where the choice comes from, in true soul. And it's the exact same thing with education for global citizenship in that speech. If you just try to think about this value creation and that first premise, which is meaning, the capacity to create meaning, that is essentially the same process he is pointing to. That is hope creation. Second element is enhance your own life. And the third element is to create improvement in others' situation, living a contributed life, as we like to say here. Right? And the fun thing about the premise you laid for your question, regardless of circumstance, that goes for all 3. It's mentioned in the by sentence lastly, but that's the premise for all 3. And that's also a key idea that you can't forget in Krieger and Ikeda's dialogue. Because it's not evidence that leads them to see hope in these really dark times. It's not evidence. It's not that they can make a rational analysis, say that, oh, you know, given this and this fact, I say that, you know, it's a good chance that it's worth hoping for something. No. It goes straight back to this core, which is so similar to hope creation in Ikeda's thinking. And this is what they really agree upon. That's their point of departure, really. That Krieger and Ikeda are just, there's absolutely no difference there. Regardless of circumstance, I choose to hope. That's where we are. And that's their departure, and that's why it's so powerful, not only from a activist point of view, but also from a philosophical point of view. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
If I may add, I first learned about the Columbia, the remarks, the speech at Columbia Teachers College today at the Heritage Hall, which was such a moving and meaningful visit. For me, it's especially wonderful because I'm at Columbia. Actually, one of the courses that I teach takes place at Teachers College. So this is a newfound connection that I'm really treasuring in this moment. And Rob Laney, who's a member of the board of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, is a Columbia graduate himself. So this is all very much feels like we're all coming together. I loved learning about the speech and even seeing the excerpt. I had seen already when I was here in March about wisdom and courage and compassion being the ingredients for this education of a global citizen. And I would add to what Alexander has been saying that hope really underlies all of those, right? Hope is the foundation on which you build the wisdom, right? None of us, nobody's born wise, right? We all learn and we all acquire wisdom through experience, through interactions, through being with other people, through learning, through spending time, through being challenged. None of it comes without hope, without light, without a desire to move forward. And I would say the same is true for courage and compassion. To be courageous, you need hope. To be compassionate, you need to also have a positive outlook that's outward focused as opposed to inward focused. And I would say that's what inspired me the most about this notion of what does it mean to be a global citizen. And I loved that part of the speech where he says it's not about how many languages you speak, although that's of course wonderful. It's not about how many countries you visited, although again, that's of course wonderful. It's about whether what you're doing, how is your education serving you, right? I mean, we often in this day and age, we see, even the way in which universities are presented or university degrees are presented is, this is going to allow me to do X, Y, and Z, right? I'm going to get a degree so I can get a job, so that this education is doing something for me. And I would say the education of a global citizen, and we've been talking about this all day today, is about what can I do for the world? How can I contribute, as you said, contributive education? How can I contribute meaningfully to the world? And there I would actually draw a parallel, since I quoted President John F. Kennedy in my remarks earlier. It's that idea that he said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And I would just really expand that to, the education in your university, right? It's not about what the university can do for you. It's about what you can do with the university education for the world, for humanity. So to me, hope is just something so beautiful. I was actually at the Vatican the week before last, and the Pope has announced Jubilee 2025. That's a year where the Catholic Church has designates a year as a special year in which all sorts of activities take place. And the theme of Jubilee 2025 is hope. So I thought that was really very much apropos our discussion and the fact that the Krieger and Ikeda dialogue focused on that. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
This is very quick clarification. Also, very simple, really. When I'm listening to Ivana, it becomes simple. Capacity for meaning. That capacity is hope. That's how it's laid out from the Ikeda side.
Thank you so much for today. Thank you for your insightful conversation. My name is Aliya. I'm from Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, and I'm really interested in nuclear disarmament and climate change. And right now I'm making a really big impact on environmental education in my home country. I have projects that I founded 2 years ago, and this impact is local. And my question to you, how do you think young generation students can bring such projects to a more global and international level? What kind of exact and specific steps should be taken for that? Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer it. I need a more. Thank you so much for that question. I feel like to really think about the global and international arena, I feel like in terms of especially dealing with the climate, you're really utilizing social media. It's very important. Both Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. We know this one individual who heads an organization called Green Hope, and she's I think a senior in high school right now. And she just constantly utilizes social media as a platform to raise awareness and to really generate support among youth, not just from where she's from, which is United Arab Emirates / Canada, but also on the global level. And now, because of her involvement in terms of social media, she's been invited to speak at different UN conferences and workshops. So the first step is to really think about how to increase your presence in social media, gather a group of friends, organize a series of Instagram posts, TikToks, etc., and then really target to try to think about what will also appeal both to individuals from Central Asia, but also abroad in the West as well, to generate interest. And that's something that our Kazakh colleagues have also been utilizing as well. They've been organizing both projects in Russian, but also in English, and are constantly updating their social media accounts in order to generate that international buzz. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Sofia. I'm a student from Ukraine, so the nuclear issue is very dear to me. The nuclear danger is very important. But my main question was, I think all of you today talked about the importance of hope, and I do totally agree with it. I'm very inspired to read this book and learn more about it. But I also think Ivana mentioned that hope is very keen to belong to the youth. So my main question would be, how do you make sure that one grows up with that hope? Because you all are the scholars, you are inspired, you do have that hope to make a change in the nuclear disarmament world. However, how do you make sure that this hope spreads? Because also I think in our modern system there's a lot of top-down process, and one always passes kind of the beliefs and the understanding of the world down to the youth, and I think that's when the change hopes in my that's when the hope changes in my understanding. So yeah, what do you guys think about it?
I can start. Thank you. It's so great to see you again, and thank you so much for your question. I'll start with a slightly, maybe a slightly sobering beginning, and then I'll move to a more hopeful outlook, I promise. But the sobering beginning was that just a couple of days ago, I was thinking precisely about young people, and I was thinking, you know, you all should be worrying about things like, does the person I like me back? You should be worrying about things like, am I studying the right thing that I should be studying? You should not be thinking, will there be a nuclear war tomorrow? You should not be thinking, what's going to happen in the area where I live from the impacts of climate change? Is it going to be a wildfire, or a flood, or a hurricane, or a drought? We're having drought in New York City. I mean, this is just like absolutely unheard of. So on the one hand, I do really feel that your generation has been placed, I was your age in the mid-1990s, where there was actually a lot of hope at the end of the Cold War that we were going to move towards a better world, a different world, a peaceful world, a new century was coming, and so on. But all that said, there have been so many things in history, and so much of actually what keeps me going on this is examples of things that you could have told people at the time that they were normalized and part of society and part of daily life. Things like slavery, things like the Cold War, things like apartheid in South Africa. So many things that were normal, and then all of a sudden they were no longer normal, right? And so I really do believe in not quite in miracles, but I do believe that it is possible. It is, and I guess that's where the hope comes from. It is possible for this issue to change as well, and to change dramatically. And I don't, in all of these examples that I gave, it wasn't, you know, it was something that people had been working on, sometimes for decades, for long periods of time, and it didn't seem obvious that the Berlin Wall was going. I mentioned being at the Vatican, and one of the things I did is I actually saw a piece of the Berlin Wall, which is in the Vatican, that they brought afterwards. And I see nuclear abolition very much as an issue where you push and you push and you push, and then the dam breaks. The dam is going to break. It's going to break. That I'm convinced of. I can't tell you when, but in the meantime, we just have to keep pushing.
Yeah.
Just a very quick note to Sophia. Sometimes I'm thinking that people like Gandhi and Ikeda, deeply religious people, it must be so easy for them, because they've already taken the leap of faith. You know, when it comes to hope, it should be easy. But then again, if you think about, for instance, the turrets, you know, the main argument made by the nine nuclear powers about why they have these nuclear weapons ready. Well, if you acknowledge that deterrents always deteriorate, if you agree with Kennedy, as you quoted, that, you know, it was just a matter of luck. That's why we're still here. If that is your worldview, I mean, if that is what you can conclude from evidence, well, then it's quite rational to hope, isn't it? To hope for a world free of nuclear weapons. Maybe you don't really have a choice. And that's kind of interesting. So, if you're a realist enough, like Ikeda says, you know, the true idealist becomes a realist, well, then you end up on the same type approach, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with what others have said. It's really, you know, perseverance, and it's even a mention. No one thought at that time of the Berlin Wall would fall. No one thought, like, my father is from Romania, and, you know, he grew up in during that time that was very oppressive when it was under Soviet control. And he told me stories that no one ever thought the Soviet Union would collapse. But many individuals who were suffering from very oppressive regimes. They all, persevered. They had that hope that one day they would be free. And in Romania, it was the dictator at that time, Ceausescu, was extremely brutal towards the local citizens, and many were fleeing the country because of the brutality. But they kept on pushing for hope that one day the country would change and be free. It was really having that perseverance, especially when you're, in a situation where everything is just so bleak.
Thank you so much, everyone. Is there any other final comments on that?
I have a little, just a technical question real quick. Thank you, Paul. My technical question, I just happened to came across my mind. The nuclear fission, we all need energy in the world, but that's the big problem. Is nuclear fission something that we should hope for, or should come to pass, become a reality in the near future? I know they're working on it, but...
Yeah, so nuclear fission we already do, right? That's the nuclear energy, the source of nuclear energy currently. I think you're referring to nuclear fusion, right? Which is the process that takes place in the sun. That's why we actually have energy from the sun. And it's also the process that is based on hydrogen bombs. I'm very skeptical. I think that nuclear fusion has been discussed really for decades, and it's at any point in time where you look and they say the research is 10 years away, and then 10 years passes and it's still 10 years away. So I'm skeptical about nuclear fusion, and I also have really strong reservations about nuclear power. I think there are a number of unsolved issues with nuclear power more generally. It is the issue of where the raw materials come from and what that uranium mining it specifically means. It is the issue of accidents, which at the time that nuclear energy was being developed, the physicists who were actually involved in this were guaranteeing everybody there would never be an accident. That was in the 60s and 70s, and then in 1979 we had the 3 Mile Island. In 1986, Chernobyl, and of course, well known to everyone here, in 2011, Fukushima. And that's not even talking about the waste problem. So there are real issues. On the other hand, when it comes to sort of what is the #1 issue to deal with, we have to deal with the weapons, because the weapons can quite literally, we've been sort of referring to this, end the world. And the reason is not just that hundreds of millions of people could die if, especially the nuclear superpowers use their nuclear weapons. It's also that the environmental changes, and not just radiation, but really primarily the nuclear winter, the issue that by attacking cities you would produce so much fire, which would release so much soot into the atmosphere, which would block incoming sunlight, drop temperatures by about 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. And this would quite literally mean that our ability to grow food, our ability to have agriculture would collapse. And the estimates are in the 5 to 6 billion range of the number of people who would starve to death in case of a nuclear war between, say, the United States and Russia. And this is just, to me, this is all I need to know to say enough is enough. We have to get rid of these weapons. And again, we have to keep saying never again until, and the only way we can actually ensure never again, right, is by getting rid of the weapons. Because as long as they exist, it could happen again.
This is also how the majority of the states also feel. The reason why we didn't mention fusion and fission in our presentations was also due to the fact that during the time of the negotiations on the TPNW, in order to have a prohibition treaty, the state parties had to agree to uphold the peaceful use of nuclear energy. So they had to agree to that trade-off, which is why in most nuclear disarmament panels, many of the experts focus on the horrific impact of these nuclear weapons instead of discussions about nuclear energy.
Thank you to our speakers and panelists for the rich discussion and our audience for your thoughtful questions.